Hey everybody, this is Erman Baradi. It is July 21st. For those who've kept track of what I've been doing the last few months, I've been interviewing a lot of folks who I know personally, and meeting new people who have a variety of opinions. I think this year is a year in which we throw labels away. You know, just because you fit a certain lifestyle doesn't mean you vote a certain way. So that's
Right.
what I've been realizing a lot nowadays. So I want to get in touch with folks who have different mindsets and different political opinions. Today we have Edward Rami, who I met on Instagram recently, like this past week. So thank you so much for being with us, Edward. First off, love your hair. How'd you do it?
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
How'd you do it? I can't get my hair like that, so.
It definitely took some YouTube tutorials. I just kind of I blow dry my hair after the shower, blow dry it down, and then I get wax gel and then just kind of throw it up. And then, yeah, I kind of use the hair, what is it? The dryer kind
Yeah.
of helps. Yeah.
Love it. Love the outfit, by the way, also.
Thank you.
Better than my black tee. But anyway, but the reason I wanted to reach out to you is because you break certain stereotypes. You are Latino,
Yeah.
you're gay, but
African
you vote
American.
conservatively. So
Yes.
people may look at you and go, wait a minute, you're gay and Latino, but you're conservative, you're Republican. Wait, how does that work out? So let's get into that. And so first off, I want to get into your background, where you grew up, your environment, the people you're surrounded by, all that stuff.
Right. Well, I think it does have to do a lot with my upbringing, but I just want to make it clear, I do identify as conservative, and I don't really publicly talk about the party that I affiliate with, but being conservative, I just want to make it clear, is not a political party. It's just an ideology. So if
Right.
you're conservative, it's just the traditional values that you carry, that learned from your upbringing, and you just apply it to everyday, modern life, whatever's going on. That's kind of just my lens of the world. That's how I navigate the world. It's just through a conservative lens.
Because I
Um,
just to clarify that too, because I've seen people say, hey, I'm a liberal Republican, or even say I'm a conservative Democrat. Not so often, but you do hear it from time to time.
right. Yeah. And it's I think liberals have this misconception that conservatives don't like change. And I don't think that's true. So I think that's why a lot of people are so drawn to liberalism, because they see it as the progressive movement. But conservative to me is progressive. It's just, as we change and we adapt new things into the world, we're just clinging onto our traditional values. And I think those come from a variety of things. My upbringing is, I grew up in a rural community. It was pretty Hispanic, Mexican. I grew up really influenced by my older cousins.
Okay.
They took me to church a lot, actually. So I grew up kind of going to the Christian church and Catholic church. And so I would say a lot of my values came from that. Just some of the values they embedded into me. They were really affiliated with the church. And it was just kind of a lot of things. I never really had they call it red pill moment. I would say it was it was just a variety of things that kind of happened in my life. Growing up religious, I moved to LA when I was 18, and then got really into personal development. Really young, I was 19, and I was listening to Tony Robbins. I'm sure you're probably familiar
Yeah.
with. And so I feel that just kind of changed my mindset, kind of helped me to get out of this victim mentality that I kind of carried throughout my years. And then that kind of segued into I don't know, I
Mm-hmm.
discovered Jordan Peterson, and then a couple other intellects like Sam Harris. Just started to really get different perspectives. And I feel it just started to shift my perspective on the world. And so, yeah, it was just kind of a lot of things that kind of led me to have more of a conservative view, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, totally. And you are currently in Central California.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born here in the Valley. It's the Central Valley. So it's right in the middle of California. We produce half that. So we're heavy on agriculture. It's $1 billion industry here. And we produce we can supply half of the US with produce, essentially, with food. And so I was born in a city here. It's a really small city called Porterville. I think it's 20,000 people, or 10,000. I'm not sure. It's really small. Grew up in
Gotcha.
a really small town too.
Gotcha. Okay. So rural California-ish kind of
Yeah,
area.
very small, nothing like the city. Yeah.
And this next question may seem like a joke, but I'm actually curious. So, what was harder for you, or what was a bigger backlash for you, coming out as gay or coming out as conservative?
Conservative,
Wow.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely challenging to come out of the closet to my family. Maybe it was I don't know, I think it took like a month for everyone to kind of get acclimated to it. But we really got over it like in a week, I would say. But that was just a challenge because it was just something that I kept in like for so long. And I came out when I was, I think I was like 15 or 16 years old. So I quickly moved through that. That wasn't much of a challenge as much as like coming out as conservative. When I started going a little bit public online on Instagram with my views, like I started getting blocked by people that I was friends with when I, lived in LA. People were muting me, unfollowing me. My own cousins muted me. So like, yeah, and it's just crazy. Like I didn't expect that people were gonna just, I don't know, I didn't expect the backlash from people that I knew. And it would really surprise me to see some of the people that really started to, yeah, just kind of distance themselves from me. And especially like the community that I grew up in, there was a time like where I think I had just posted a video about Ahmaud Arbery when BLM
Okay.
kind of sparked up again. And this guy from my town like took a clip of what I said and like tweeted about it. And then other people from my city like were subtweeting it and writing like really nasty things about me. So yeah, I was like a really like negative response from people
Did
that
they
I knew.
spin your words a certain way?
They kind of did, yeah. They just took like one page because I created like a slideshow of why I don't support BLM, and then they took like one slide and then like kind of gave their own spin on it. So that's kind of what happened.
Gotcha. Interesting. Wow. So let's dive into that just a little bit. 'Cause I want to talk about the issues that are most important to you, but also touch on, I guess, people's perception of what you represent, what conservatives represent. So you mentioned immediate backlash from people that used to be friends with. So when you speak to conservatives nowadays, I think it's a common thread that the internet can kind of suppress their thoughts, or people on the left can suppress their thoughts, or friends who say, hey, we're the part of liberals are the part of inclusion and love and peace. They're so quick to judge someone just because they have an R next to their name or because they have a conservative next to their name. So for you, what is it that you think should change about the modern day liberal?
I think the most important thing, I think the thing that turns me on more towards conservatism is the idea of free speech. And you kind of like lightly mentioned that. I would say that liberalism needs to be a little bit more open to hearing another perspective, because I feel like it's oftentimes them on that side that wants to censor people. I would say that I see more of a cancel culture coming from the left side. They block certain speakers from coming to university. I feel like they're just very sensitive with the words. And I would say, we need open discussion. We need open dialogue. I feel like it's important. Sometimes I purposely debate with people and give an argument just for the sake of like learning. Like, I think it's an art that kind of helps you grow, and it's okay to have a conversation. But I feel like, I would say, that's probably the biggest one is if liberalism just practice having open discussion. I think a lot of more people on the right would be okay with liberals. I think that's kind of where we tend to mesh the most, is just censorship. I would say that, especially, that's how I feel.
So if a liberal gave you 2 minutes of their time and said, okay, Edward, explain to me, what is something that would surprise them that you actually agree with, or that is something that you both have a commonality between both of your perspectives on life?
Good question. I would say like LGBT rights. I'm LGBT myself. I identify as gay. I don't know. I feel like we're growing as it's very hard. I don't know. It's kind of hard to answer that question. I feel like, I want to be honest, I still consider myself a student. I'm still learning
Learning,
myself.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know that I identify with conservatism for a number of reasons, but I'm not like anti-liberalism. I do have liberal friends, and I do tend to agree with some of the things that they agree with. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm still a student. I'm still learning.
Hey,
So
and I'm glad you openly accept that and point it out. So I think we're always learning. Every one of us is always learning. You touched on cancel culture a little bit earlier, so I want to dive into that a little bit. Of course, in the last 2 weeks, there's the whole Goya conversation.
yeah.
The CEO of Goya supporting Trump and thanking him for what they're doing. So let's touch on that in your perspective on that, because I feel like you know, d- d- in a way, and this is hopefully not treading too much with agreement with anybody, because I'm trying to play the middle here, but um, I feel like calling a company out and saying boycott this, boycott that, you still got to remember that these CEOs employ staff. There's employees involved and their families involved, and Goya does contribute millions of cans to certain communities. So, do you feel like boycotting Goya would hurt more people than it does actually help them?
Would hurt who? Goya or?
Well, would boycotting companies like Goya hurt more families than it would benefit the world if they were boycotted?
I would say definitely. What's ironic about it is that their argument is that they're what made them mad was that the founder of the company or the CEO,
Yeah.
he was pro-Trump. He went to the White House and was supporting Trump. But what's ironic about that is Trump that day was signing the executive order for Hispanics. So it's really ironic how their argument is that Trump is racist. He doesn't support minorities. Yet that day he was signing the executive order. The owner of Goya is Hispanic and it likely employs a lot of Hispanics. So what's ironic about boycotting that is that they're directly affecting not only families, but Hispanic families. So it really makes no sense. And there's like this huge hypocrisy in it. I was totally on board with I haven't bought Goya products yet. I haven't gone to the grocery store, but the next time I go to the grocery store, I'm definitely going to pick up some Goya products. But yeah, it really made no sense to me. I think it's hypocritical.
Do you feel like there's like a huge damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing with Trump nowadays? Like if he does something that people support, it's like, oh hey, because he supports it, let's not support it. Like let's go the opposite way.
Definitely. I made a video on my Instagram about the executive order that he passed, where I kind of dived in and explained what it was exactly that he was doing. And there were people that responded and still gave me hate and said that, even though he did that for Hispanics, they still call him bluff or bullshit on it. Like they don't, even if he does something good for minority communities, I don't think they're at a point where they can accept it. I feel like they're so scarred by Trump that, yeah, like you said, even if he does something good, I don't think he's really going to get the recognition from them or the support. It's like he's lost them. That's how I feel. That's
So
what I'm seeing.
it is a big election year. This November is of course the presidential voting. I guess you say election.
Yeah.
Sorry, looking for the word election.
It's a crazy.
Yeah. So November's gonna be big. So what are the things that matter to you the most when it comes to picking the candidates? Not even just on a presidential platform, but on the local and state level.
I would say, well, it's very, where do I even begin? That's like a huge question. I mean, just the whole coronavirus kind of changed everything. Like what's funny is like last election, I didn't vote for Trump because I just didn't like him. I took it very personal what he said, during his introduction. But I've seen the results. I've seen right before Corona happened, unemployment rate for Hispanics was at an all-time low. The economy was doing really well. Of course, Corona happened. It's unprecedented, but I would say it's very important for people to remember what was happening before Corona. I really do believe he's doing the best he can with Corona. And of course, not everyone is happy with the outcomes and it is affecting everything. But if people can remember like what was happening before, I would just take that into account. And there's just, the economy, like, I mean, the Hispanic unemployment rate, like that is something like the strict borders as well. That's like a huge discussion to kind of go into, but I really like where Trump was headed. I know this changed like the trajectory, but I do support a lot of what he was working on. Just to like quickly touch on the border, there is a lot of drug trafficking happening and sex trafficking happening. And I feel like a lot of people on the left don't talk about it. And I was, starting to learn, I'm still learning about it. But that's something that he was focused on. And so that was kind of like why I started to support Trump. And so this election year, I'm really taking those things into account and I'm trying to remember how things were before Corona. Because I think this kind of is shifting our perspective on election year, I guess.
Yeah. Let's go there because on paper, on paper, open borders and bringing anybody in being, it's a nice thing to do, right? But then conservatives say, hey, there's a practicality to this. Like we have to vet because there is trafficking involved, human trafficking, drug trafficking, things that you don't really talk about, right? So conservatives can be like, hey, you have to take this into account when it comes to immigration. So when it comes to immigration, what do you feel like is the common misconception when it comes to the conservatives and Republicans' views on immigration?
What is their misconception
What
about?
is common misconception of like the general public when it comes to what conservatives think about immigration?
I think I really think that most people in the country that are not conservative, like the general public, they believe that there's like torture happening at the border, and it's not really their fault. I would say a lot of that is due to the media's like portrayal of the border. We have, Congressman AOC, saying, referring to it as like an internment camp, just really making it seem like the border patrol agents there are cruel and nasty towards immigrants trying to come here. And I used to think the same thing. I actually bought into it, but as I started to do my own research, and I actually had a really long, I would say like 3-hour conversation with a border patrol agent who works for Homeland Security,
Okay.
and I asked him
Like
so
face to
many.
face?
No, like, yeah,
Oh,
we had a FaceTime call.
okay.
He found me through Instagram, and I just, I wanted to have a conversation with him. So he just, he told me firsthand what it's like, working for the border, and just kind of debunked a lot of misconceptions that I had about it. For one, a lot of the border patrol agents are Hispanic. I think the media likes to portray this idea that they're white racists that are trying to stop any immigrants from coming. So he like quickly debunked that, said that a lot of them are Hispanic working, they sympathize with them because a lot of the agents themselves are immigrants, or, their parents were immigrants or whatever. And so I feel, and then he also told me, he literally babysat a baby one time that was like left in a river by itself by their parents, for a better opportunity for their baby. Obviously, like they go above and beyond. Like he said, he like watched the baby, like he bought an iPad for the kids, and just said that like the way the media portrays it is just a complete lie. And it's just a really long discussion, but yeah,
I
I
mean,
would
now that
say,
you mentioned it, I realize that any pictures I see of ICE is white people. So I'm sure like they're, it has to do with some type of agenda. You take pictures of these folks, but not these agents because they're Hispanic. So don't take pictures of them. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, definitely. And also like the viral pictures of like kids in cages, like there are some that were used by the media that they were literally just staged cages here in the US in different states where people were protesting the kids in cages. And so they like built their own little cages, took pictures of them, but the media picked it up as if those were like really the cages. And so there's like a lot of false information out there. And the cages thing, like I said, I'm still a student. I want to be really clear. Like, I don't want to give any false information, but I believe the cages are a temporary thing, to my knowledge, when I've done some research, and I'm still doing more research on it. But to my knowledge, the cages thing is just a temporary thing. And then they're moved to something a little bit more stable. They're given, they're given healthcare. The kids that are young, I think it's like up until age 18 or 20, they go to school, like they're given education there while they wait. So there's just a lot that the media doesn't cover, and they make it out to seem that they're treating them really horribly. And from what I've started to learn, it's the complete opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's true, I'm still learning. I didn't know that. I didn't know that if that is true. So, and to
Yeah.
your credit, I was doing some research last night, and I don't know everything in it either. I got to look into it more. But there's something called like the Flores Act in '97 under Clinton's administration,
Mm-hmm.
and I think once again I might be wrong, but when a family illegally crosses over, the parents are taken away, or the adults are taken away because they broke the law, right? So if you illegally crossed over, then the adults are taken to jail or some sort, right? And the kids can't go with them because that's they can't be put into prison with the adults, right? So the alternative is certain centers, right? So the I guess conservatives usually say like, hey, the kids shouldn't be put in jail with the parents, so they have to go to the alternative, which is these centers. So
Right.
I think to your credit, I'm still learning once again, but
Right.
I believe that's why a lot of these children are put in these centers because they
Of course.
can't be with the adults in jail.
And I'd just like to add that that is not even a zero tolerance policy. They're not always separated. So they're separated when they have a suspicion that their parents are involved with criminal activity, or if the kids are being used and exploited for trafficking purposes. There's like three general reasons why they're separated. So there is not, as of right now, there's not a zero tolerance policy. It's only happening if they suspect that something else is going on. And then yeah, like as you mentioned, they separate the kids because oftentimes the kids are put in units and fake family units. It could be like me and a woman pretending to have two kids who are not really our kids, and we're just using them to cross over. And maybe even exploiting the children for sex trafficking purposes. So the Border Patrol agents, I feel like it's a necessary step. And I feel like it's good that they look out for that, because we would be crazy to think that sex trafficking isn't happening at the border. You know what I mean? And so that's meant to protect the children. And I agree with it. And I feel like if a lot of Hispanics, and not just Hispanics, the general public, I feel like if they actually understood that, and if the media portrayed that, then they'd shift their idea about it a little bit. But I don't see that that's being portrayed. I don't see that most people just have that idea about the border. I think most people just think that the immigrants are treated like shit there. They're treated less. But oftentimes, like, these kinds of subjects are not being discussed. And I feel like if they were, then people would be a little bit more open-minded.
Hey man, I'm learning more from you now. There's certain things that you're saying. I didn't know this. Thanks
Yeah.
so much. Thanks so much for that as a fellow student. You mentioned a little bit earlier the Corona situation. Of course, people died. Conservatives who kind of talk about the the misconception of the results of coronavirus. No one's denying that people have died, right?
Right.
But some conservatives will say, hey, there's misconstrued numbers here,
The
or there's something
political
fishy,
hoax, you'll hear them
or
say.
there's something going on. So what's your response to that? I want to get not just as conservative as Edward. Like, what's your response to the reaction to these numbers, the reaction of Corona?
It's a big subject. I will say that you're right. I do myself. I take it very seriously because I have my mom. She has an underlying condition. She has diabetes, and so what we know is if you have an underlying condition, like, you're at higher risk. So I really take it serious. I take care of myself for her, but at the same time, I do believe that it's everything in America seems these days to become politicized. And I do feel like some people are taking advantage. We've seen reports that people are misconstruing the numbers for more funding. You get funding if your hospital, loses somebody to coronavirus. So
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
yeah, that incentive in itself is like it's just so obvious that some people would take advantage. Like, we know Americans, we know how people can be. I don't have my complete foot on it. Like, I wouldn't say that I have a formed opinion, because I feel like it is unprecedented. There's a lot we don't know yet, but I would say that I do believe that some people are taking advantage of it. I do believe, I don't know, it's just from my past experience with other things that have happened. I feel like it's just safe to say that some people are politicizing it and taking advantage of it. So that's
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Okay.
Go ahead.
If we had a Democratic president and during COVID, and the numbers were the same, 120,000, what would the media say about this president's success or his work, his or her work with Corona?
Like, if Obama was president, they'd be kissing his ass. Like, I mean, it's just obvious. Like, with Trump throughout his entire presidency, like, every little thing that he did just got backlash. And if you have something like coronavirus where, it's literally killing people, we don't have a vaccine, they're going like full on, like, rage towards him. So I think they would be a lot more soft if it was a Democratic president. It's just, a lot of people in the media, they have, I don't know if you've heard the term Trump derangement syndrome, TDS.
I've heard of it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in the media just have TDS. So I don't know, I feel like they would have gone easier on them.
Gotcha. And so, of course, Corona, it was one of the biggest stories of 2020. Then you also got what's going on civilly with civil unrest. And you mentioned BLM earlier. So If you don't mind talking about it, you mentioned that you weren't supportive of the movement. What is it about the movement that you don't agree with?
Like I mentioned with coronavirus, the movement BLM, I do believe it started with good intentions. I don't doubt that at all, but I do see that it's been politicized heavily. Yeah, this one I can speak for a little bit more. I don't know if you know about this, but if you go to blacklivesmatter.com, and if you're ready to make a donation, you can read through the disclaimer. The organization that handles the funds, they're called Act Blue. It's actually, I don't know if it's, yeah, that's a nonprofit organization that basically takes a cut of the funds and it goes directly to the Democratic Party. And Joe Biden has got like this, since BLM happened, he's gotten like so much more money than any other month for his campaign. So it is like a lot of that money is being fueled to the Democratic Party. So that's one example. And if you go through like their mission statement, you'll see that the founders of BLM are Marxists. They believe in the destruction of the nuclear family. They believe in defunding the police. This is a political movement. That's what it comes with. And so that's kind of where I criticize it, because a lot of the changes that they want, I just don't agree with. I don't see that they're gonna be beneficial. I actually feel like it's gonna hurt, minority communities, like defunding the police. I've seen a couple of clips, looked a little bit into it, and seen, if you take money away from the police, that directly affects their communities. It doesn't affect people that are wealthy and have their own securities. It affects people in poverty.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I don't agree with.
Did you see the Don Lemon and Terry Crews interview a few weeks
Yeah.
ago? Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about that, because people will say, okay, so this is what Don pointed out, was that, okay, Black Lives Matter is about this, but not about that, right? So do you feel like BLM is too narrow in its scope in its saying of all Black Lives Matter, but then like Terry's like, hey, how about these communities? How about these people who are not politicized or they're not talked about? Do you feel like there's a political framework in which people are talked about when they die, and then there's certain people that are not talked about in the inner cities and all that?
Well, Don Lemon's like argument I felt was weak, because he said, he tried to make the argument that BLM is a conversation about police brutality. I get that it is now, but when it first was born, it wasn't about police brutality. It was just about a white man killing black, the black guy. It happened with, I'm forgetting
Trayvon.
the name. Yeah, Trayvon Martin. So yeah, I would say that that's a weak argument, because that's not actually how it stemmed. So it's been changed, it's been shifted. And then, even using his logic, if we're talking about, cancer, as he said, or, if we're talking about this subject, why is that such a big subject of discussion? Like, I don't get why it's such a big talk if we know that 9 unarmed Black people were killed last year. But, Black on Black crime is at an all-time high. Like it's way higher than if you're likely to dying, by a white person. So it's just, even using his logic, I don't see that it makes sense. I don't see that it's such a big deal as they make it out to seem. I think a lot of it is fueled by the media. I think it's not just the media. I do feel like it's generational. I think it has to do with like maybe their upbringing and just their ideas, the young Black community, just ideas that they were fed as maybe by the media, maybe by their own environment, what they saw. So I don't know. It's a very touchy subject, and I don't want to like come on here aggressively and act like, I completely like I'm against the movement, but at the same time I try to keep an open mind, and I don't want to dismiss people's feelings. Yeah, okay. So I do understand that a lot of people are hurt by what they see, but I just wish that there was someone with a bit of an influence who could maybe reason with the community that feels hurt. And just try to change their idea about what is happening instead of catering to it and fueling it and creating more victimhood. I wish there was someone that could just show them the truth, or at least show them a new perspective. So that's kind of what I wished would happen, like out of BLM.
Gotcha. So you agree with the statement Black Lives Matter, but not necessarily the campaign or the movement of it.
Right. I feel like it was really tactical for them to create that name because I feel like they knew it was being hijacked by politics. And you can't deny that Black Lives Matter. When you say you don't support Black Lives Matter, it does sound racist, but that was on their end. They were so tactical to use that name. That was really strategic, actually. And I will credit them for the marketing because it was genius. Yeah, it's really hard to debate, because you've got people that are supportive of BLM. They're programmed to, they hear the mantra Black Lives Matter, so there is no question about it. If you follow the movement, if you haven't really questioned it, it's hard to question it. The name is BLM, Black Lives Matter. So yeah.
So I like to look at tweets a lot from both sides, from liberals and conservatives. So there's a statement that I saw recently, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't have it in front of me, right? But so there's a certain thing that somebody said that kind of, I don't say sparked or lit a light bulb in my head, but kind of like sparked interest, and I had to ask you about it. So um, in these big democratic cities that people are protesting corruption and police brutality in, people fear that these protesters can end up still voting for the leaders of those cities and still get the same results, next year. So, do you think
Right.
that's going to happen, or do you think that's something that people can be tricked into doing, voting the same leaders back into the government position?
That's a really good point you brought up, and I would say that is exactly what's going to happen. I think it was George Floyd's funeral. There were like politicians there. There were influencers who were saying, we're gonna vote him out. I think referring to Donald Trump, and the whole funeral or memorial that they had for him, it was like heavily politicized, and so the whole message was like go vote, as in vote blue. So yeah, I definitely think that that's the underlying message that they're trying to shoot out there to the general public. And I do think as a result, many of the people protesting, many people in support of BLM are going to vote the same people in those cities. Those are Democrat run cities. And so yeah, I do think it's highly likely that they'll vote them back in. It's unfortunate because when you look at it objectively, I mean, some of the democratic cities in our country, like there's some of the highest crimes like happening in those cities, and it's not being talked about. Like the black on black crime in Chicago is really bad. I think last weekend, I want to say like yeah, it was definitely over 10 people, 10 black people were killed by other black people. And it happened again the weekend before, but nobody's talking about it. And these are Democrat run cities. And that's what's going to happen. They're just going to vote them back in. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to really see a change.
Do you feel like do you feel like journalists should talk to the families of these victims, in these cities who, their children are not talked about publicly, their deaths are not talked about publicly? Do you think it's the right thing for journalists and politicians to talk to these families and say, hey, we hear you too, even though your family's death or your child's death is not talked about?
I would say 100%, but I don't, I'm like, I'm starting to understand the media more and more as I get more into this, like, hobby. I would say like I developed, excuse me. And it's sad to say this, but they won't because, that story doesn't sell as well. BLM, it just sells. This whole movement is trending. It's just a huge hot topic. Obviously, it's what our culture is focused on right now. So of course, naturally, if they cover BLM, they're going to get higher ratings. If they start to cover black on black crime, like the ratings are going to go down. So it would be a complete waste of money for them. And I feel like that's the reason why they're not doing it. Yeah, that's my understanding about journalism here and the media, mainstream media in the US. I don't think there's I don't think they're fueled by integrity. I think they're fueled by profit margins. And I think they're just trying to, make more income. And they
Hey,
just go.
you can say whatever you want. I'm not a journalist. I'm just some guy interviewing you. So,
Sorry.
so
Hey, I'm kind of like a journalist too. So.
hey now, according to your post on Instagram, yeah, I think technically you can be considered a journalist. So,
Right.
but going back to the topics that matter to you most, you mentioned being part of the LGBT community. Um, what do you what do you think are certain things that conservatives should be more open to? that would be more appealing to members of not just your community, but to the public in general?
That's a really good question. I think conservatives need to learn how to play the liberal game. And I'm seeing that more and more. I think there's a lot of tactics that are used by liberals, especially, as it relates to spreading information. We see on Instagram, they create like little slideshows with like neon backgrounds and like, they're
They're
very,
packaged well. They're packaged well.
they're good marketers and they're entertaining. A lot of liberals are artists, they're gifted in that aspect. Conservatives are more, I don't even know. I just feel like they're just a little bit different. And I feel like if they started to learn their tactics,
Okay.
play their same game, I think we could start to spread information that way. I'm starting to see some conservatives that I follow are doing exactly that. They're creating slideshows instead of like, defund ICE and defund the police. It's like, no, support ICE, support the police, and here's why. And so I'm
Okay.
starting to see that, and I'm seeing that a lot from young conservatives. So yeah, I think it's important for us to just learn how to play the game, because if you can't beat them, you got to join them. You got to play them at their same game and try to influence them in that way. So I would say that just start to market better. I think conservatives and Republicans do a really bad job at marketing, and that's why we're seeing a lot of young people are liberal. So I think it's important for us young conservatives to get out there and really market to them.
Gotcha.
And so that's basically what I'm doing. I think that's the mission I've kind of picked up on.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, do you feel like is it safe to say that people our age, the millennials, 20s, 30s, do you think it's safe to say that a lot of us react emotionally rather than logically when it comes to political opinion?
Yeah, definitely. I would say even I react sometimes emotionally. It's like an instinct in us. There's often times where like media, I'll see a headline and then I react emotionally.
Yeah.
Even though I follow my principle of like, okay, no matter how a headline makes you feel, like look into it, do your research before you have an opinion. That's just the principle that I follow. But I'll find that even now as I'm reading headlines, sometimes things can get to me, even before I do the research. And I think if you're someone that doesn't really care, if you're just a regular, consumer and you just see a headline, yeah, a lot of people just react on emotion and they don't really look into it. So then they carry that opinion and then they spread that to everyone else. So I would say, yes, that's definitely how we tend to react, I think, in general.
Gotcha. And now, before we go, Edward, I want to give you as much as you want a time to express to anyone watching, hey, I'm Edward. I'm conservative. I'm not what you think I am.
Yeah.
What's your message to everyone out there?
I'm not doing this for attention. That's like the number one thing that I get. I'm not doing this to appeal to white people. I'm not trying to gain acceptance. I'm just trying to provide a different perspective on things. What I see is like the LGBT community, and I'm seeing this now more with the Hispanic community, especially young Hispanics. They tend to all agree on the same things because I think we're in America, we're grouped collectively, whatever group we identify with, we tend to think just like everyone else in the group, or we try to share the same ideas. But yeah, I'm gay, I'm Hispanic, I'm Mexican American, and I don't agree with mainstream narrative. There's a lot more to it. I understand how they run, and I think it's important for everyone, even if you're not Republican, you don't have to be Republican, but if you've always identified as a Democrat or as a liberal, maybe just try to be a little bit curious, hear another conservative perspective. Maybe hear someone else in your community with a different, like me, I'm gay, so hear my perspective. Watch a couple of my videos. I have a lot of people I can recommend too. Like Blair White, she's like probably somebody that influenced really heavily in the LGBT community with, having another perspective on things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of us out there. A lot of us aren't vocal, but I'm seeing a surge of us. So just be open-minded, hear what we have to say. And I think you'll be surprised to learn that we are just average people with just, a different perspective on things. We're not evil. We're not trying to spread hate. We just have a different perspective. And yeah, you might be surprised. So be a little open-minded.
Edward, that was so beautifully said. But before we go, where can people find you on social media? Do you have any sites you want to share?
Yeah, I mainly post on my Instagram, Edward X Rami, Rami, and then you can find me on YouTube. I post videos on there. I haven't really got into the swing of things on there as much as Instagram, but I do post on my YouTube at least once a month. So you can search Edward Rami. And then I'm on Twitter, Edward X Rami. And then Parler, Edward Rami, without the X. So
Gotcha. Thank you so much for your time, Edward. And maybe next time we can talk about your hair and more hair products.
thanks, man.